Ayanaya hail him. Hail his majesty. This is just a simple concept in the liberty. Go and go read the book, or as we say, Rastology. If you want to know the truth or some philosophy, Rasta is the truth, Rasta is simplicity. Jah Rastafari Selassie pave the way for we.
Welcome to Rastafari Reflections. I'm Kaveed Brown, and today we'll be discussing how the November 2nd, 1930 Grand Coronation of His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie I and Her Imperial Majesty Empress Menen Asfa has changed the directions in the Rastafari movement and the features of the Rastafari movement. Knowledge paves the way to love, and love in its return fosters understanding and leads one along the path of great common achievements. Popular words by His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie I. For many, understanding what a Rasta means or becoming a Rasta means is difficult or would be difficult. Some people in their small-minded worlds would argue that being a Rasta is not a true way of life or a true religious practice, as it is often said that Rastas do not believe in God. And this, my friends, is a misconception. When one does this, they run into many problems, such as redefining the tenets of what Rastafari means. Now, from my experience in this course, Rastafari is more than a religious practice. It is the truth, it is the way of life, it is the beacon of knowledge to our past and where we're coming from. It marks where we were in the time of slavery in Africa and how we have achieved much from the slavery period, and it is an interesting social movement. Another reason why Western people have a hard time understanding what being a Rasta means is because they limit the definition of what a Rasta man means or what being Rastafari means. So you'd find persons defining the Rasta man as one with dreadlocks, one who smokes weed all day, one who replaces the word God with Jah. This course, however, has changed my view too on what being a Rasta means. November 2nd, 1930 marked a very important day in history and on the Rastafari calendar. This was the day of the Grand Coronation of His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie I and Her Imperial Majesty Empress Menen Asfa. Since this day in 1930, it has been seen as one of the holiest days in the Rastafari movement, and as such, this report seeks to give an account of the importance of this day in the Rastafari movement. November 2nd, 1930, in the St. George's Cathedral, in the heart of Addis Ababa, Rastafari Makonnen was crowned with a new name, Kadamawi Haile Selassie, an unprecedented event, prophetic rather, that attracted the attention of nations of the world. A few people, however, didn't know that this event would have awakened humanity from the sleep that they had fallen in. Haile Selassie I was in fact a direct descendant of the biblical kings David and King Solomon, who grew up among royal dignitaries and spiritual masters. He himself had a kind of knowledge and wisdom and left us completely astonished. On November 2nd, 1930, Ethiopia and the whole wide world witnessed the coronation of the one who would be the last true ruler of the House of David, a new black king as posited by Goldson 2020. It's not by coincidence that this event took place in Ethiopia, where biblical stories were so alive in the minds of the population and where the Spirit of Christ was so present in the social background. In this ancient country, the personality of Haile Selassie I, his action, his imminence, and his compassion would have soon generated among the people the feeling that he himself was the Messiah who returned in his kingly characters. Thus, the Rastafari movement was born, and what we call the new creation has emerged. Rastafari Makonnen went in fact from the status of Ras, which meant the head of the people, to the one of Negosa Negast, or the King of Kings, as we often hear followers of the movement referring to him as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Similarly, it has a meaning for us mankind with His Imperial Majesty's coronation. We ourselves are crowned with a new, more complex level of life. We could say that it's a superior one in which we are invested of the government of our lives and this creation. The coronation makes us officially creators of this creation. The coronation is a fulfillment. It marks the end of an age and the beginning of a new one. It ends the waiting period in which we were languishing for the Savior's manifestation because humanity was tired of suffering under the yoke of evil and injustice. Now, in 1930, the time of victory of the good over evil began, and since then, the international dynamics were overturned by the work of Haile Selassie I and his example. On numerous occasions, he showed that even in this century, David would have defeated Goliath, securing the victory of good and justice. In our lives, therefore, this coronation is a constant warning and an unceasing reminder that despite what happens and how the battle may be hard, the Lion of the tribe of Judah has already won and will always win. He is the ruler, forever breaking the chains of physical and mental oppression. This, my friends, means that every righteous mission that we take will be successful. Any challenge that puts us to the test will be won if we act in accordance with the divine spirit and behavior. For if the King of Kings assures us that the victory itself is certain, and he himself is the real and not mythological example of this victory, then what can we fear? What is there to fear, or what can we worry about? His Majesty opens the new creation, which is the last and definitive era whose characteristic is in fact the victory. In the new creation, the man of God will have benefited of working and living knowing that he has already won. Worries and tribulations will be overcome by the incessant memory of the coronation. Mark Allister conferred that the roots of Rastafari can be dated back to the 18th century when Ethiopianism and other movements that emphasized and idealized Africa began to take a hold among black slaves in America. For those who had been converted to Christianity, the Bible offered hope through such passages such as Psalms 68 verse 31, which states, "Princes shall come out of Egypt, and Ethiopia shall soon stretch out her hands unto God." This coincides with Dagnini 2009, who stated that the Rastafari religion takes its origins from Ethiopianism, an ancient ideological matrix, which was created from and around the name Ethiopia originating in the black worlds. As a result, such an ethos was guided and strengthened through the late 19th century through the rise of the modern Pan-African movement, and particularly the teachings of the Jamaican-born Marcus Garvey, who reportedly told his followers that they should look to Africa, where the black king shall be crowned. He shall be a redeemer. Additionally, in the 1920s, it brought forth such an influential proto-Rastafari text, the Holy Pibi. Now, Vestal 2014 posited that Jamaican preachers began promoting the ruling authority of Haile Selassie over King George. And by the mid-1930s, the Ethiopian emperor was regarded by followers as the living embodiment of God. Although no formalized central church was materialized, the budding fractions of Rastafari found common grounds through their beliefs in the lineage that dated to the ancient Israelites, black superiority, and the repatriation of the diaspora from the oppressive land of Babylon to Africa. Their movement reflected a range of influences, including Old Testament instructions on avoiding certain foods and a local belief in spiritual powers of Ariwan. Perhaps the original self-predescribed sufferers were the Rastafari, who from the genesis of their community in the 1930s colonial Jamaica found themselves among the poorest of the poorest and at odds with the state, whose agents, especially the police, regularly victimized and dehumanized in a numerous amount of ways. Preachers such as Robert Hines, Joseph Hibbert, and Archibald Dunkley achieved the eminence during that time, but to many scholars, the most important figure in the early Rastafari movement was Leonard Howell. A former member of Garvey's Universal Negro Improvement Association, the UNIA, Howell attracted a large following after returning from the extensive travels to Jamaica in 1932. Now, as it relates to new developments, in the late 1940s, a radical version of Rastafari known as the Youth Black Faith had emerged from the slums of the Kingston, the capital of Jamaica. A precursor to the existing Nyabingi Mansion or branch, the Youth Black Faith became known for an aggressive stance against authorities. Additionally, they introduced some of the features that became widely associated with Rastafari, including the growing of hair into dreadlocks and the group's unique dialect. Although Haile Selassie reportedly rejected the Rastafari depiction of him as a deity, he, in 1948, seemingly embraced their cause by donating 500 acres to the development of an Ethiopian community named Shashamene. Over the next 2 decades, additional branches of Rastafari gained devoted followers. In 1958, Prince Charles Edwards created the Ethiopian International Congress, or as we call the Bobo Ashanti, which ascribes a separation from society and strict gender and dietary laws. In mentioning dietary and gender laws, the coronation of His Imperial Majesty highlighted the role of women in Rastafari, as we know that his wife, Her Imperial Majesty Empress Menen Asfa, was also coronated, and I found this rather intriguing because this shows that women now have a role in the Rastafari movement. By the coronation of Her Imperial Majesty, it shows that women have strength. Women are not only subjected to be betas of Alpha Rastamen, they now have a place in Rastafari. As such, Caribbean women have undergone several gender role discrepancies, and thus it creates inequality, resulting in the oppression of women, as postulated by Moshe et al. 2020. The most recent Jamaican population statistics conducted showed that a significant difference was seen in the ratio of male to female Rastafari followers, highlighting a patriarchal dominance within this group. And as such, the gender role expectations of Rastafari females suggests that there's a gap between gender role expectations and female sexual health and well-being within their community. The crowning of Empress Menen Asfa paved the way for black woman's strength and role in society. Since then, women in Rastafari have been making strides in the labor market. So now we see Rastafari women expressing themselves through music, through publications of books. One literature states that the family structure of Rastafari is solely patriarchal, and women ought to be submissive to their partners, though she is the breadwinner of the family. In addition to being submissive, the role of a Rastafari female is to care and provide a stable environment for her kingman and their children, placing Rasta women secondary in decision making. Now, with all of this being said, I am still of the belief that the coronation of Her Imperial Majesty Empress Menen Asfar has changed the view of modern day Rasta women, as was seen in the coronation, in the celebration of the coronation last November. Majority of the persons involved in the ceremony were females, and I found it rather interesting that females stood up, took charge, conducted such a beautiful celebration, and that should be commended. The movement later found its important ambassador, Bob Marley, a convert to Rastafari and the founder of reggae in the African diaspora. Now, Bob Marley, through his music, spoke mostly about the themes of oppression, Babylon, and being free from that oppression. Though Rastafari was always decentralized of its faith and culture, it attempted to introduce a unifying element with a series of international conferences in the 1980s and 1990s. As of 2012, it was estimated that there are approximately 1 million Rastafari throughout the world. In its traditions, it continues in communities such as England, US, Africa, Asia, and Jamaica. In concluding, all things Rasta and Rastafari is clearly a syncretic religion mixing elements of traditional African beliefs with elements of a Pan-African and Afro-centered version of Christianity, and it is obvious that challenges within Christianity is at different levels. To begin with, its structure. Contrary to Christianity, which is a religion with a well-organized hierarchical governance structure, the Rastafari movement structure is strictly anarchical, like most animist cults. There's really no official governing structure dictating conformity of theology. Neither acknowledge Rasta leaders as the Pope, nor official Baptists, etc. Furthermore, Rasta symbols and codes are challenging Christianity too. God is embodied in Jesus Christ for Christians and in Haile Selassie the first for Rastas. Lastly, but by no means least, the coronation ceremony of Emperor Haile Selassie I and Empress Menen Asfa has really changed the view of Rasta nowadays. We now see women having changing roles. We now see Rastas embracing the Rasta levity. We now seeing more followers within the Rasta movement as a result of this auspicious event. Haile Selassie represents that beacon of light and that beacon of strength and wisdom for Rastas and followers of the Rasta movement. The coronation ceremony on a whole represents a holy ceremony in the Rastafari movement. So that's a wrap. Thanks for joining us today on Rasta Reflections. Bless up.
It's a big man say my kind was the wanted kind, the black kind. Babylon bad mind. Babylon say we are bow terrorists. But I never that. Them just wasn't getting it. We as Rasta choose to talk the talk and walk the walk and live it. After all, disciples of His Imperial Majesty trod we trod, stepping razor, stepping. So Babylon say we bad. But Babylon a cool heart people, held your people captive, strange lands, strange mans, borrowed identities and stolen minds, tied up tongues, but eyes went blind. Babylon say my people was the wanted kind. So, big man, big Dan, give the order, bring in our Rastas dead or alive. Bloody April, Bad Friday, 1963. Death toll, fright codes, bald head, dread, dead. Babylon said my people was the wanted kind, the black kind. But still, Babylon bad mind. Remember in 1963,